Let me look online just to see.
Mr. Hunter?
Here.
Vice Mayor Wise?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Mayor Ross?
Here. And we have numerous other people who are on, who are linking in by Zoom and also on audio. Can you hear? Okay. We do have to speak up in this room. Our audio speaker's in the center of the room. We will do that. Okay, Mr. Peterson, if you could just go over the agenda today and make sure that and we may have some other things that we would like to add to it. We'll check with the commissioners.
Your agenda today is consideration of an assignment of an option to purchase property at 216 Fairhaven Road, and then we will go into a budget review and discussion for the FY21 budget.
Is there anything else
Is there anything that could be done to adjust the volume?
Bob is moving it closer up to us, if that helps.
About as far as I can go.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does that help?
That is some better.
Okay, we will do our best to speak clearly. Okay, I'll take my mask off right here. All right. Okay, Pete, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, your order of business today is consideration to assume an option to purchase an agreement for real property located at 216 Fairhaven Road. This piece of property is a 21-acre tract that's adjacent to a 3.5-acre tract that the city already owns at the end of Eddie Williams Drive out of the Johnson City Industrial Park. For a number of years, the Water Sewer Department has had a need to get a larger and a new services complex. This includes their warehouse, their engineering division, their surveyors, as well as their materials laydown yard. The facility that they're in now is about 50 years old. It lies in the general vicinity of the Watauga River and a tributary creek into the river. During periods of heavy rain, the road there in front of the plant frequently floods, making it a challenge to get in and out. The building is probably a decade beyond its useful life and is in serious need of being replaced. Some of the criteria necessary to find a suitable location. This is an industrial site, basically, with a lot of truck traffic in and out, a lot of vehicles parked outside. There's also a lot of materials that are outside in the laydown yard. So we wanted to be very conscious of the location of this proposed site in order to get it in a place that would not be disruptive or to adjoining properties or to degrade adjoining property values. So being at the adjacent to the industrial park is advantageous for those reasons. A couple of other reasons that this particular piece was looked at is that it is within a couple of blocks of our raw water plant, and it's a little closer into town, so it would be geographically in a little better location. We're not going to have flooding issues there, and there's room there for us to build what we need and to have some room left for additional expansion sometime in the future. The way we have gone about this, the Realty Trust Group got the original option on the property, and with the understanding that this option could be assigned. The purchase price for the piece of property is $315,789.48. And where we are with this option right now is that the option expires on May the 8th. There is $5,000 earnest money with the sellers at this point in time. And if we're going to purchase this property, we need to go ahead and assume the option and begin the process of closing on the property. Carl McInturf has done a title search on it, revealing no problems. We've also had a geotechnical evaluation of the property done, which has identified areas that are buildable and areas that are non-buildable. The recommendation is that it is a suitable site for what we want to build. We have also engaged Goins Rash and West to do design work, some preliminary evaluations to determine if the site is suitable and that they can design facilities that will meet our needs on that particular piece of property. It is somewhat of a challenging site in that it is bisected both by a TVA transmission line and a natural gas transmission line. So we're going to have to work around those two easements across the property. In the back 3 or 4 pages of your packet that's in front of you are some overhead maps that will give you an idea of where the location is. That's an overhead of the industrial park as attachment A. And then the last page in your packet shows you a preliminary proposed layout of the facility and what it would look like. Eddie Williams Drive will be to the bottom of that page. We have talked to the design folks about the possibilities of rearranging this preliminary layout if it deems or works out to work better in a little different layout. And so we've done all of our due diligence, the research that we need to do to determine, is it a buildable site? Can we build what we need on that site? All those types of things. So our recommendation would be to get your approval to assume the option and to move forward with closing on this piece of property as per the terms of the option agreement in existence.
Move approval.
Yeah. I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
We can go ahead and get a motion in a second if you want, then we'll have a discussion. Joe's made a motion.
I'll second it so we can.
All right. My question is, the appraisal done by Bill Miller came in at $251,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Why would we be paying $315,789?
Okay, there is, part of that is the fees associated with using a realtor to buy the property, and the balance of that is in negotiations with the sellers. That was their bottom price. They were unwilling to sell for less than that, and we were after looking for months and months, we were really challenged to find another site that would work for our needs without ending up on an arterial or a collector street or adjacent to a neighborhood or something. And we felt like that in order to be a good neighbor, that we really worked hard to avoid those types of sites.
Yeah, I'm just concerned with the budget challenge we're gonna be having, that even though $65,000 difference, that,
Now, I will point out to you, the water sewer fund is in nowhere near the financial condition as the general fund.
okay, this would all be out of water.
This is all water sewer funding, and they are in an extremely good position. They have funding, and this is part of their capital improvement plan. They have funding in place to proceed with the acquisition and the issuance of debt in order to build a facility, as well as to do their capital projects that are in this year's budget. As we talk later today, we're going to be talking about just the general fund. The general fund is in a very tight financial position, but when we get to discussing the water sewer budget a little later in our meeting, you're going to see that they're in a very good position from a cash perspective, and that they're going to be able to proceed full speed ahead with their capital projects and getting all that delivered on schedule.
Couple of questions too. On page 11, it says
Speak up as much as you can.
that this extends to November 9th, 2019, but you said it was till May. Did it change from this that's written in here saying November 9th, 2019? That's
Yes, sir.
the paperwork in front of us, not that it couldn't change again, but that's what we have. It's November 9th, 2019 at 4 o'clock. That it ended, I know they initialed that to change from the 8th to the 9th, but
Yeah, and if you look on page 627, the option agreement was actually entered into on November the 9th, 2019. I saw that over in the agreement as well. But if you will look over on page 5 of 27, there's a recap there from Realty Trust Group, who is the actual holder of the option at this time, that points out the option term, the option expiration. So I'm not sure how that date got at that point in that option agreement.
what messed me up too is I don't know how you can have two different dates on the same document kind of thing, so.
Yes, sir.
All right, and the other is, I know they're okay monetarily right now, but 65,000 over it was appraised seems like a lot to go over what's appraised, and that's the bottom line. This is the second time in the last couple of years that people have come back when we're buying property, that we're buying it for a lot more than anybody thinks it's worth. So I'm not happy with it again.
Pete,
Well-
were there conversations after the appraisal was made between the seller and the buyer as to the value in relation to the actual contract price, to see if there was any wiggle room to negotiate down?
Yes, sir, and if I recall correctly, I think we negotiated it down 6 digits from where the original asking price was.
So why do we think the appraisal is so low compared to what we're going to pay?
I think the easements had a huge impact on the value of the property. Mr. Carr with Realty Trust Group is here. I mean, if you'd like to ask him some questions, or Tom, I mean, either one of them could, they were intimately involved in this, and they'd be glad to answer questions if you've got something.
The other note too, if there are these, power lines that go through there, you said you were gonna have to work around them. I mean, they have other potential buyers for this property, they're willing to, pay a premium when you have.
Not that I'm aware of, not that we're aware of.
Would anybody like First, bring Mr. Carr in for any.
If he could explain why we're paying
Question.
$65,000 more than the appraisal, I would sure like to hear it.
And when he's coming in,
Okay,
what's the timeline of actually implementing? If we execute and purchase this, what's the timeline?
Once we.
I can't
once-
hear what's being said.
Once we get the option exercised, I think we've got 90 days to close. Is that correct?
Oh,
Mr. Carr?
well, I meant to actually build on the site.
To get construction done,
When do you think they'll actually start doing what the construction?
if we close on this in the next 90 days, I would be hopeful we could be under construction sometime this fall.
So this is a near term?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, hey, come on up. We were just concerned about the appraisal of this property and the price that we are being suggested to pay for it. Can you kind of give us an idea of why?
I can.
Loudly.
Oh, yeah, you might want to.
Why don't you come up here by the speaker, so, because Vice Mayor's,
This search has been going on for quite some time. We assisted early in the process of identifying large tracts of land. They're very few to find, for starters. They're even fewer to find in the right zoning district. And so that's the first challenge you run into. This piece, the second thing you have to understand is it's owned by an estate. And so there are multiple family members involved. That they have been very cooperative, but they have their own appraisal that predates this one, and it was substantially higher. And I don't think it was right either, don't get me wrong, but they believed, they started out at a value north of 400,000. We started out way down in the mid to low to mid $200,000 range, and we met at this number. But this is the number that it took to get all of the heirs to agree. And so it's an unusual type of negotiation. It's not just one person that you have to appease. There's a number of folks involved, and one person can stop the deal, for lack of a better word. And so this is what it took to buy it. I won't speak to the appraisal directly, but what I will say is appraisals can vary, and I do know that this group of sellers had their appraisal by an MAI appraiser that was substantially higher earlier. So I felt like it was a reasonable price given the size of the land, but what we were trying to do with it, and it's just what it took to buy it. It's just what it took to buy it. I'll answer any questions. Thank you.
so the going rate for property, is this agricultural? What's it zoned right now, you know?
Industrial.
Industrial, so that comes out about 15,000 an acre. That's 50.
I've seen industrial land go for more, and I've seen it go for less. Again, large tracts, hard to find. It's relatively flat. It's not flat, but there isn't anything in northeast Tennessee that is. It doesn't appear to have a whole lot of rock on it. It's going to have some. That's inevitable. But all things considered, it looks to be a good site. It's served by the industrial road. That's another big plus. It's got services to it, and it's adjacent to property you already own. And so you just got to maximize a lot of things here.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor, do you have any questions of Mr. Carr before he leaves?
No, thank you.
Okay.
And I'm sorry if I'm shouting. Maybe you can hear me perfectly well. Sorry.
We can. You're coming in loud and clear.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. We have several questions. Any other comments we have? None? All right, then, who's doing our
Mr.
vote?
Wilson, I guess.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, we'll turn it over to you.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise,
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes. Great.
Thank you, commissioners. At this time, we will go into a review of the proposed 2001 fiscal year budget. Dustin, you ready to roll? You need a second to pull some stuff up.
Wendy needs just a minute to pull power.
Okay?
Okay. Take it up and move over here so I can, unless you want to talk to me.
Come on.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll need to come up this way and speak loudly.
Okay. So we've been, for the past.
You're gonna have to talk real loud.
I
Talk
understand.
quiet.
I'm gonna stand right beside the phone here. Can you hear me, Vice Mayor?
I can. I'm trying to get on by way of my PC in hopes that I'll have better audio, but I can hear you right now. If Wendy can let me in, that would be good. For now, you can keep going. I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So we start the budget process really with the CIP in October, but the operating budget starts in January. And it's a process. Departments turn their requests in to me. I compile them. We have departmental meetings with the city manager. After those departmental meetings, management gets together and goes through all the requests, and ultimately the city manager makes a recommendation to you all. So obviously the issue in the current year and potentially the issue in FY21 is the considering the situation that's going on right now is the considerable drop in revenues that we are anticipating, or we are experiencing and anticipate to experience for some time. You can see on the slide there what our budget number, our budgeted revenue estimate was for FY20, and where we're projected that to come in at the end of FY20, and the budget number for FY21.
Yeah, I mean, the point here is revenues this year for FY20 in round numbers are gonna come in about $5 million under budget. So we've got a $5 million hole to work out of in the current FY20 budget. And when you compare the revenue budgeted amount for 21 to the actual number or the projected number we're having for 20, you know, you're seeing an increase there of about $1.5 million. So we are building in some hope and assumption that the 12 months from July of 20 to June of 21 will produce better results than the last quarter of FY20. But conversely to that, when you look at budget 20 to budget 21, we're actually budgeting $3 million less in revenues from fiscal year to fiscal year. So numbers that you're going to hear us repeat during the course of this discussion is it looks like revenues could be off about $5 million in FY20, and it's going to look like we've got about a $7 million deficit to overcome in 21. Now, I won't spoil the story and go to the end, but I think you'll be better pleased with 21 than what it sounds like when I tell you we got a $7 million hole. Wendy?
I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
The breakdown on the decreases in revenue you see before you. Sales tax is obviously off. When sales taxes are off, business taxes are off. State shared revenues are going to be impacted because state sales taxes will be off, and there are other revenue sources that they distribute back to us on a per capita basis will be off. The hall income tax This will be the last year that we get the hall income tax. If you'll recall, about 5 years ago, they decided to phase that out over a 5-year period. The one thing that's not up here, we have budgeted property tax collections the same for next year as what we received this year. Historically, we have about a 1% growth, but I think from the perspective at this point in time, we need to budget no growth in property taxes because we realize there are going to be some folks, due to businesses going out or being out of operation for a considerable period of time, may not be able to pay property taxes next year. Hopefully that won't happen, but I think we are prudent to build that in there.
Are you talking about the actual revenue or the collection of?
The actual revenue.
Okay.
The percentage collected will decline, actual dollars collected hopefully will be the same.
Okay, I was curious
Yes,
what you were projecting that's gonna be.
Yes, sir. Now, and I guess to back up, just a general statement. The way we have approached this budget is this. We know that we're in a serious economic period right now. We know that revenues are gonna be off, and there's probably two approaches to this. We could build a budget with high aspirations of a quick recovery, but when we do that, it's really hard to go back and collect stuff because a big spend of ours is capital equipment, capital projects, personnel, and once you spend that money, you can't get it back. That's the reason that we've got such a big deficit to deal with in the fourth quarter, because we've already made all of our big expenditures for the year. So we have chosen to build this budget from the opposite perspective of let's budget for what we think is the worst case scenario. And if revenues come in better than what we have budgeted, we can look at it next January or February and do a budget amendment and reappropriate monies and pick up and do things that we have deferred in the budget that we have built today. It's a lot easier to approach it that way than it is to get into the fourth quarter, because remember, we don't get sales tax numbers until the fourth quarter. So by then, we've already spent all of our money. There's nothing left to do other than turn the street lights off and lay people off, and you have to take some really extreme measures to make up any substantial money in the fourth quarter. So I want to lay that out so everybody understands. If things get better, then we can do a lot of things that aren't in this budget. But if things stay on this line that we've laid the budget out on, we're going to be okay. So
Pete, how do you estimate the minimum business tax of 28% decline? What factors do you use to come to that conclusion?
Bob? No.
That is based on, the business tax goes through the calendar year. It's paid in April or May. So we should have, our business tax this year should be on target. That's just an estimate based on the decline that we're seeing this year. So when they pay the bulk of that next year, that'll be back on the 2020 calendar. It's estimate on that decline, how much it.
Does this include business license and excise tax?
It's their tax that they pay, yes.
Some of it goes to the state, right?
Well, this is just ours, this is our share.
But it comes back.
Yes, the state collects it, sends it back. There's a lot of, on the revenue, this is probably some of the more challenging estimates to try to make.
Yeah.
given where we are. As we get more information between now and first reading, we'll continue to tinker with these. If some of our money, if some things come in better, that there could be an adjustment. If it comes in worse, we may want to go the other way. Hopefully not. And for next year, it's just kind of a guess. Like Pete said, we're trying to build a budget that we know we can live with. And, if things get better, if we really come out and kind of go gangbusters or better than we think, we can always amend it. But I think it's a prudent approach, given where we are and just the unknowns. How fast is the economy going to come back? I don't think anybody really knows. Well, it's really up to the consumer. When they feel comfortable getting out, but kind of a long answer to your question.
Yeah. I didn't know if they've given you some guidance coming out of national or not.
This budget is based on a lot of conversations with other local governments and watching how the state's going about approaching their budget. And I did see where when they go back, they're talking about skinnying down next year's state budget $1 billion less than they've already skinnied it down. And that the hole this year is $540-some million deeper than what they thought it was going to be. I mean, we're talking about 20% unemployment in the second quarter of calendar year 20. And this thing isn't going to ramp back up real quick. I've probably done more reading about Wall Street stocks, muni bonds, and economic forecasts in the last month than I have in my entire life. And I haven't seen anything that varies much from what we built this budget around.
Speaking of the state, I guess my concern is, have you heard anything of their perspective on how to take care of their budget? Because I know in years past, they've always looked to take out of other local pockets versus at the state level.
I haven't heard anything directly, Commissioner, but I do know this. Over the past 5 to 10 years, previous legislatures have eliminated several revenue sources that the state has historically had. So there aren't a lot of places for them to go to get additional revenue. They could raise sales tax from what it is to something higher, or they could reduce expenditures, which I think is getting at what you are. They just send us less money, and we're going to have to shoulder a bigger share of the state's shortfall and our shortfall, because they don't have a lot of places to go for money. Now, does the feds come through with state and local government help in phase whatever they're getting ready to go into? I think that's become a political football, and there's more politics involved in that than there is economic considerations at times, but that's just personal opinion. I'm not counting on any more money from the feds. If it shows up, great, we can amend things, but there again, at some point in time, all of us have got to pay that debt back. I mean, all they're doing is borrowing money right now to give to somebody else that needs to borrow money, that gives it to somebody else that needs to borrow money, and, there is no free ride. Somebody's going to have to pay for this at some point in time.
We need to keep our eye on a quarter-cent sales tax.
Revenues
As
are...
the state's looking for revenue sources.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mary.
What did the mayor say?
I'm sorry, Joe, I said we need to keep our eye on the quarter-cent sales tax that we're 9.5, we can go up to
Yes.
9.75, and we always talked about that for the schools at some point in time. But the state has the capability, I guess, of coming in and taking that.
We don't get it first.
The state always has the ability to, we are a subdivision of the state.
Yep.
They give us and they can take us away.
Well, the state also raised of that extra, we get up to $1,600. then there's a gap from 16 to 32 that the state has taken. So,
He's talking about on automobile sales.
Oh, yeah.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's applicable to anything over, I mean, you only pay it up to $1,600. So they could, that's an option that they could take that, or bump it up above $3,200 on the local option sales tax. We don't get that, we only get half of that, the state's picked the other 16 to 32 up, and they get that money directly.
Commissioner?
Yeah. Budget's just a number. I mean, it's just a number, and there's so many unknowns. We have no idea what's gonna happen, next year. But it sounds like your budgeting and your spending concept is changing, not your budgeting, but your spending concept. Once the budget is approved and passed, we pretty much knew what we're gonna have was gonna be close or better. We don't know that this year, so basically, the city is taking an approach of, for the first quarter, or the first whatever, we're not gonna spend the money that, even if it's in the budget, and we're gonna put that off, so we're in the fourth quarter, unlike this fourth quarter, we're gonna be spending money in the fourth quarter, but only if we have it. Is that a good concept? Because otherwise, we gotta dig deeper into those numbers.
No, well, yes and no. The 21 budget is not built that way. We have leaned the 21 budget out that we can spend it exactly as it's proposed, and we're gonna be okay. The only cushion in that budget that we're gonna delay spending until the fourth quarter will be the resurfacing budget. That's kind of our ace in the hole in this budget, is there's $3.1 million in the proposed budget for resurfacing, that if the revenues really tank harder than what we've budgeted, we can always not spend that $3.1 million that you've already appropriated and make up $3 million worth of revenue shortfall in the fourth quarter. Now, if revenues come in as proposed in the 21 budget or better, we can go ahead and pave in the fourth quarter, and we're in good shape. But as far as capital equipment and capital projects, the only capital equipment and capital projects in this budget are projects that are grant funded or that are partially grant funded and we're obligated to spend that we're gonna do next year. There's a couple of pretty good slides in here in a minute that'll better explain the detail of the capital approach.
Because I think the question's gonna be, every time something comes up with a big number, can it wait 6 months? Can it wait 3 months?
There really aren't gonna be any big numbers next year, Commissioner, to be honest.
I'm supposed to get ready for the question.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know, but in reference to the paving, is this, I mean, with the news about oil prices where basically they're gonna have to be paying people to take oil off their rigs, is this not an opportune time to actually be looking at doing more paving or putting that on the front end? And I don't know what the composition of that cost is in that, in paving, but or is there an opportunity to buy at current prices and hold off on the actual implementation, but to have that fixed cost, if it is a cheaper price?
At this point, we haven't been offered a cheaper price for us to spend money, but we'll be glad to ask. We'll look into that. Along those same lines, and you've probably heard me reference this before, in the downturn of whenever it was, 7, 8, 9, whatever, we were able to issue bonds for less than 1%, and we were getting construction projects for 60, 75 cents on the dollar, and we did probably $70, $80 million worth of construction between 8 and 12, because it was a great buy. And we were in a good cash position that we could go ahead and borrow money and have enough fund balance to make the debt service payments until the economy caught back up to us, and that's what we did. So the budget that's being proposed for you is gonna leave us in that kind of position. We're gonna have some money in the bank so that if investment opportunities present themselves during a down economy, we can buy low and enjoy the benefits when the markets come back.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking for your comments on that, and, you know, that might be the case with paving now. Again, I don't know, it might be better to do the paving right now while oil's down, and then hold off on purchase of trucks and stuff when those prices come down, because I don't, right now, talking to car dealers, sounds like they're doing all right now.
I think automobile dealers are doing fine right now.
So,
Our equipment purchase is grant.
Grant funded, yeah.
That's it. I mean, so we're kind of taking those funds, it'll come out later in the presentation.
Right.
But that's the bulk of our equipment purchase.
Not to cut you all off, but there's not but about 15 slides here. And can we get through those and then we'll dig into the details?
okay,
Yep.
go ahead, Doug.
Okay. The next few slides are just graphs showing revenue trends for various components of our total revenue.
Can you all
That's the-
see those numbers?
No.
Is it showing up on your iPads at all?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
And that curve is going to get real familiar over the course of the next 4 or 5 slides. You know, as you'll see, there's the property tax slide we talked about earlier. We're going to hold it flat for next year. Big hit in sales tax, we're planning on some rebound from 20 projections, but not a lot. Hotel motel tax, we've got current numbers through March. Through March, the wheels hadn't fallen off of it yet. We won't see April numbers probably for, another 10 days or so.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so, you're seeing a pretty strong rebound in hotel motel numbers there. Hopefully, they're gonna have a bad March, a terrible April, and things will start climbing back out May, June, and July, and that's kind of what's reflected there in those projections, is that hotel motel tax probably won't go back to where it was, but we're gonna get there. State sales tax obviously is off. One thing I'll mention in concert with that, gas tax, unlike sales tax, is based on gallons sold rather than price per gallon. Not only is the price way off, the gallons sold is way off. So the gas tax revenue going into the state is gonna be way off next year. Well, this year. The money we get as part of that state collection is gonna be off next year as well. Hopefully, things will get better. I know the price is gonna get better. I saw the days where the world's cutting back 10 or 12 million gallons a day in production, through the various sources. So they're gonna control price. I'm just not sure how many more gallons are gonna be pumped.
Well, that should affect the state transportation budget
That will have a big impact on us.
and those projects.
Thank goodness they started exit 17 last year, and they're not planning on doing it this year. Okay, next slide. Of course, this reflects the Hall income tax, as we pointed out earlier. In 16, they voted to eliminate it, and this will be the last year. Next year, that'll go to 0. So I guess the big takeaway there is in 16, we were collecting almost $1.2 million, and in 22, we will collect 0. So that's $1 million a year we've had to absorb into our budget.
So when we typically build a budget, our budgets look relatively the same year to year. So the original plan for 21, it was, we for the last couple of years, this was supposed to be the third year of the 4% pay plan adjustment. And that was in the original plan. We typically cash fund equipment, try to get close to $3 million a year. And in addition to that, $1 million in cash funded projects. Also, for 21, we were scheduled for some debt roll-off. So we would typically issue more debt to maintain budget neutrality, but issue debt to do larger capital projects. Well, that's not the case this year, unfortunately. As of now, there is no pay plan adjustment in the budget, and we'll talk more about personnel here in just a minute. Most of the equipment is funded through grants in the upcoming year. There is no new money for capital projects. All the projects that are in the 21 budget are carryover money from FY20, a lot of which is grant funded via the state or the feds. And we have proposed to not issue any debt, not issue what we would have due to the debt roll-off, but rather absorb that into the operating budget. So this is how we built this year's budget, and Steve Willis is going to speak to insurance here in just a minute. But there's these numbers are all general fund. So just so you know, it's not all funds as a whole, just general fund. There's a 12.2% health insurance increase, and like I said, Steve will go into that in a little bit more detail here in just a moment. There are no new positions. Several positions were requested, as usual, but there are no new positions in this budget. We are unfunding several positions. We reduced the fuel budget. We've gone in and just cut other operating budgets in different departments. I already mentioned the debt service. A couple things that are in this budget, Mr. Peterson can speak to, are in public works, and one of them is a project on Rome Street. The other is the stream mitigation project at Buffalo Valley. Is there anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, the stream bank mitigation program out of Buffalo Valley, that's got a probable cost of about $400,000 to get all that constructed. There's probably somewhere between $1.5 million and $3 million worth of stream bank credits out there. So as you can see, the ROI there is phenomenal. We can only sell 20% of the credits off in any given year. So what we would be hopeful in doing would be to get the construction done and ready to sell credits in calendar year 21. So if there's $2 million worth of stream bank credits, that would be about $500,000 worth a year at 20% a year. So that project has the potential to pay itself back within the same calendar or fiscal year. So I felt like that was a really good investment where we can get our cash and actually make some money off of that over the next few years. The other project that Dustin mentioned is the North Run Street project. For several years, we have paid a lot of attention and spent a lot of money on the downtown area and up around Langston and a couple of different places. And I think we've all heard from some of the business owners on North Run Street their desire and needs to have some improvements made along Run Street in terms of sidewalks and some drainage improvements and some landscaping and some of those types of things. So we have included $100,000 in Phil's operating budget, which would actually, the source of the funding would actually come out of the Economic Development Reserve account. But since it's going to be done in-house, we'll have to fund it through an operating budget rather than a capital budget. We feel like that's got a really good return on investment as well. I mean, Sales Tax Central in Johnson City still is at the corner of Mount Castle and Rome. And that area, we really haven't made any reinvestments in that area in a long time. So I felt like it was important to see if we could brighten things up and make some improvements out in that general area. So that is included in that operating budget. The big takeaway off of this one, at least from my perspective, is we normally take that debt service roll-off and issue new debt with it, and it remains budget neutral. In order to balance this budget, you heard me say earlier, we had about a $7 million hole to dig out of. Well, 1.6 of that $7 million hole is we're gonna absorb debt roll-off into the operating budget in order to fund the operating budget. March up, Brad.
And, go ahead, Lindsay. Before, Steve's gonna get on here in just a second, a 4% raise would have been about 1.2. So 1.6, 1.2, you'll see as we go along, how that starts to add up.
Did you look at, Steve may address this, did you look at any amount at all? I know you're gonna talk about perhaps offset some premiums or something for employees, but did you look at a 1% or 1.5%?
We looked at 1, 2, 3, and 4%. Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
No.
Hold on one second. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Okay, as Dustin alluded to, we are recommending a 12.2% increase to the operating budget for the health fund. As you can see from the slide, since June of 2017, we've lost about 2.2 million in fund balance. There's a lot of reasons behind that, but the two primary drivers are we continue to experience excessive, what I consider high claims, those that are in excess of $100,000. I think we're still doing a lot of things really, really well in terms of our wellness program, our clinic operations, our diabetes program. So I don't think we have a fundamental issue with how we are managing the health plan. I think we've just had a couple of really tough years. And a lot of those claims are things like cancer, accidents that have occurred that we really don't have much control over. I would remind everyone that we've been 6 years without a health fund increase. So what we've proposed would actually change the funding percentages, whereby the city funding percentage would move from 80% to about 82%, which would absorb the amount, the 10% increase to the employees. So the employee rates would not change. However, we do plan for some plan design changes that we would implement in October of 2020 that would increase copays and deductibles. We feel as though that would generate $400,000 to $500,000 in annualized savings. So this would definitely put us in a better position from a reserve standpoint. Another concern that I have that I've discussed with both Mr. Peterson and Mr. Wilson is from numerous sources, we are hearing that COVID is going to have at a minimum an 8 to 10% effect on healthcare costs as a whole moving forward. There's a lot of money being lost, as we all know, in the healthcare systems right now, and that money will be made up over a period of time. We feel confident in that. 8 to 10% is probably a very conservative number in my opinion. So we know we're going to be experiencing that. We hope that the high cost claims reduce, but obviously, as I said earlier, a lot of those things are completely out of our control.
Steve, is this reserve fund, is that just the city side or is it a combination?
This is just the city side. The schools are also looking at some things. I know their board met yesterday and Leah and I talked this morning. The schools fund reserve is actually under $1 million right now. They're at about 800,000. So they're in a very precarious position, and we certainly don't want to find ourselves there. So we want to take actions now as necessary to ensure that we don't find ourselves in that situation.
What's our, this is a reminder, what's our level of stop loss? What you just, how much?
350.
350. Is that right?
350 with an additional $100,000 aggregate. And you will actually see next week in our commission meeting, that our renewal for stop loss is up, and we actually are experiencing a small, about a 3.2% decrease in stop loss costs for the upcoming fiscal year. That's both city and schools. The schools over the past fiscal year have experienced 2 claims that went to stop loss. On the city side, we have not had any. We've had some that have approached that level, but none that have reached the $350,000 threshold.
Is there any need that we look at that amount as we renew it? Do we lower it? Since we're having some of these big claims, but
That would increase.
I just like premiums go up that much more.
I understand that, but you're kind of trying to balance your, it used to be something like 250, didn't it?
It was, it's gradually gone up. I've been here 13 years, and it's gradually ticked up over that time period. We've been at 350 for 2 or 3 years, I believe.
It might be good to do an analysis to look, let's just say if it went back down to 250 and then look at our claims experiences and see how many would have been impacted by it.
There's a slide coming up that's
It shows
gonna
that?
enlighten you a little bit.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I won't dwell on that, but, yep.
So here are expenditures on a line item basis from fiscal year 2017 moving forward. You can see our medical claims back in fiscal year 2017, that would be period ending June 30th, were about $6.5 million. We're projecting 2020 to be about 7.6 million. Significant increase in prescription claims as well. Also, our health assessment program is holding steady. Same thing for our clinic, diabetes care, and consultant expenses. Small expense on the PCORI tax, which is as a result of the Affordable Care Act that was implemented several years ago. That's a tax on self-insured funds. And you can see it has decreased as well, but it continues to be in play. We are under contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield through June 30th of 2021 to administer the plan from an ASO perspective. So you see the fees there are pretty flat as well. The next slide, I think Dustin has outlined some prescription drug highlights. And when at the top of the slide, prior period versus current period would just be the same number, the same 9-month period from one fiscal year to the next. So over on the right-hand side, you can see a lot of red bars, which is not what we're looking for. That indicates that our numbers are at least 5% above the benchmarks. And the benchmarks are defined as self-insured plans, similar to ours in benefit design, as well as similar in size to our organization. So we've seen a significant increase both in non-preferred brand name drugs as well as preferred brand name drugs. Now, I will point out that this slide does not reflect our prescription drug rebates. We do get significant prescription drug rebates. I believe year to date, we are at about $930,000 in prescription drug rebates. That's through, that was actually through the prior fiscal year, not our current fiscal year. But we've similarly experienced those kinds of rebates in this year as well. We're working with Blue Cross to actually have these numbers reflected in our averages for a comparison against the benchmark, but we've not been successful in making that happen yet. But at the end of the day, we're really looking at about 13 or 14% increase in overall drug spend in the plan. And these numbers are just reflective of the local government side, not schools. The next slide outlines some high cost claims, and we've looked at these before. So we had 7 claims that exceeded $100,000 from 7/1 of 2019 through March 31st of 2020. 6 of those 7 claims are still active claims. And as you can see beneath the chart there, 7 claims resulted in almost 15% of our total claim spend, that 14.47 there. So again, we have some cancer claims in there, some claims that were as a result of accidents, things that were really outside of our control. And you see the number one claim there for cystic fibrosis is also a very expensive one. Are there any questions I can answer related to the health fund?
Steve, just remind us too, on the health clinic, the administrative cost for the health clinic is paid for out of the health trust fund?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
And do we pay it all? Does the school system help share that cost?
We share those costs at a 52-48 split.
Okay.
And very soon, in the next 6 weeks or so, it's our plan to come before the commission and report on our year 3 return on investment for the clinic operations.
Okay.
We certainly believe that that is still a great tool for us, not only to lower costs to the city, but also to our employees and provide a service for our employees as well. And I feel certain those numbers will bear that out.
I guess my point was with the school system health trust fund, as low as it is, that may be a concern coming up.
Yes.
With those costs out of it.
We have had about 450 employees, and that number's a little dated. I say employees and or dependents who have established our clinic as their primary health provider, which is exactly what we hoped for when we established the clinic several years ago. So we've removed the barriers for folks getting the care they need, and we know that every person that walks through that door, not only do they experience savings with the lack of copays, but we're essentially paying a wholesale price versus a retail price.
That's been one of our more popular things we've done, and I think the schools are similar in their employee appreciation of that.
As, to tie a couple of things together here, as Steve pointed out, there's 12.2% increase. Steve, how many dollars is that? Somebody?
In the general fund, it's about $586,000.
$586,000. Mayor Brock had asked earlier about did we consider making any employee salary adjustments, and the $586,000 increase would have equated to about $25 per month for employees that had family coverage. So when we looked at doing a 1% raise, we had a fair number of employees who would have spent more for the health insurance increase than they would have gotten in the 1% raise. So what is built into this budget is for the employer to absorb the entire 12.2% increase, and the employees will not get any compensation adjustment. We felt like that it was a more equitable way to approach it in the current economic climate, and the impact of that is we currently have an 80-20 split in terms of employer and employee assuming cost of the health care. That's going to change to a 22-18 split. I mean, we pick up the employee share, is that right?
82.
80, I'm sorry, yeah. My math's not real good today. It was 80-20, now it's going to be 82-18, sorry.
Now, on the flip side, as Steve mentioned, that schools are looking at their fund balance, and I think their split is
70-30.
Yeah.
Has been for quite a while.
Now, that includes their dental insurance. our dental insurance is paid 100% by the employee, and they have a richer retiree health insurance opportunities than what we do. So there are some plan changes in there that I think justify a different split between employer and employee. You know, that was a conscious decision that they made, and as Steve pointed out, I think over the last 3 years, we've hit our fund balance, what, like $500,000, and then this year is gonna be $1.2 million, something like that.
Yeah, probably $1.2 million to $1.3 million, yes, sir.
So we've been hitting our health insurance fund balance as well. And with what you've got built together this year for 21, we're gonna get fund balance again next year, is that correct?
We're projecting around 700,000. Hope, you know, these, plan changes aren't really fully built into this, so that's, hopefully it's gonna be less than 700. And again, it's one of those things, we don't have a lot of control over it, but, I think that the plan changes will help offset that. We were estimating roughly a 17% increase would have gotten us even. And, hopefully the plan changes will get us between 14 to 15%. So we'll just have to see how it goes. We felt comfortable going with only 10% increase, well, 12% for us. This is the first time the city's done this. In the past, if we've had a premium increase, it's been shared equally between the employee and the city to keep that 80-20 sharing model. So this is the first time we've done that. But we'll just have to go through the year and see how it goes. Next year, who knows? It's too far out.
We haven't had a premium increase for the employees in 5 or 6 years, have we?
We haven't had an increase for the employee or the city 6 years.
6 years.
That's pretty unprecedented.
Yep.
When we tell our peers that, and people in the insurance industry, they kind of marvel at, how can you do that?
I think a lot of it is our wellness program, our clinic, and, you know, all the different adjustments have been made kind of in real time along the way. It's been working, but yeah, I think we're seeing some of these big cases that are going, and, you know, it's hard to recover from some of that.
Looking at health insurance costs over the last 20 years, there's as much or more luck than there is skill and healthcare costs. I mean, who knows when you're gonna get a stroke, a heart attack, a cancer, or whatever. And, I mean, this thing's pretty cyclic in nature, and we've really been riding this for a while, and now we're starting to see a little rise in it. Schools hopefully are at the peak of their rise in cost, and they'll enjoy some better times. But Commissioner Calhoun, I'm sure you've looked at this stuff from various angles as a healthcare professional and administrator, and you just can't predict some things.
Now, you just have to, you've done a lot of things proactively, and we can't stop. And you gotta figure out what the next greatest opportunity is to get ahead of this thing. Because one of the things we know is it's not gonna go, the costs aren't gonna go down, but our utilization is figure out different ways. Like the clinic has made a dramatic impact. There may be some other things out there. So,
Well, I think our risk is really the COVID recovery, you know, in the healthcare system, trying to,
There are
a lot
lots
of
of,
money being spent in the healthcare system that's going to be spread, they're going to spread out the recovery costs.
yes, ma'am. All right, any other healthcare questions, Steve? You got
Well,
anything?
Bob was talking about plan design changes, and I feel comfortable that with making those changes October 1 again, we're waiting on some final data points from Blue Cross Blue Shield, but I think we can safely say, based on our past really 2 years of claims experience, we should see a savings of around $300,000 for the 9 months remaining in the fiscal year after we make those changes. The rationale for making those changes in the fourth quarter, when you have a change in your deductible, someone who may have met that deductible earlier in the year make a plan design change, they get hit with additional deductible amounts. By waiting until the fourth quarter, provided that the condition happens in the fourth quarter, there is a fourth quarter carryover to the following year. So that would have a little bit of a positive impact for someone who may find themselves in that category. Plus, it gives us more time to get in front of our employees, hopefully in a face-to-face manner. We're very transparent with what our costs are. We don't hide anything. And our employees need to understand why we are where we are and what we can all do to work together to improve our position, so that we can go another 6 years without making changes.
And after we get that finalized, that will come back for approval.
Any other questions, Steve?
I guess I would ask one question. When Steve makes reference, we go these years without making changes, which I think is to be applauded. I wonder, is there a rationale for not making small, essentially inflation-based adjustments rather than doing this every 5 or 6 years, do something that reflects that there is going to be change over time and just build it in as a 1%, or I don't know what the number is, but would you speak to that?
Yes, I mean, certainly that would be one school of thought. Again, the high cost claims that you can't predict obviously have an effect, but one thing we may want to consider, and we actually spoke by phone with some of the school's folks about this very topic this morning, is that we build a minimum health fund reserve balance. So we set the number, and if we fall below that number, we make an adjustment at the beginning of the budget year. And if we go over that amount, if we exceed that set limit, then we don't make an adjustment. So that might be an approach that we look at as we move forward.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just to give a little background, going back to FY16 and 17, we took over $1 million of fund balance in those 2 years. And then it's hit us in 18, but 18 and 19, we pretty much took it all back. And then our real drawdown from back to our 16 levels is going to hit this year and next year.
Well, explain where the money comes from that can be moved into fund balance.
Well,
Premiums.
it's when we have excess revenue, which comes from essentially from premiums, and we have less expenses, then whatever how that nets out, if it's positive, that goes into our fund balance and helps build that up. And then, that's what you want to do. Then when you have a bad year, you're able to hit that. And so we talked about an increase in 19, even in FY20, and we thought we were good enough. We wanted to go one more year just to see how it's going to go. We felt our reserves were healthy enough that we could do that, and we're still okay. Now's the time for us to do something. We can't, after this year, we have to make a recommendation for a change.
So the reason I asked that question, listening to Steve here just a minute ago, no general fund money is budgeted to go into the health trust fund. I think that's kind of what we call that fund.
Not separately.
No.
But
what Steve was talking about is you can't fall below a level, so you have to keep the funding up in that trust fund. Where would that money come from if it's not built into the...
We would have to adjust the premiums, either premiums
Okay.
or plan change that would contribute money back to it. That's the funding source for it,
Okay.
fund. We are the insurance company.
Right. Okay. All right, I get it. Thanks. Okay, let's move on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Steve?
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So the next slide is, we spoke a few minutes ago about not vacant positions, unfunding certain vacant positions in the general fund, and that's the list that is proposed.
Those police officers, is that ones that currently have, because I know we already had a shortage. but-
we've got a vacancy of
14 officer positions.
14 right now, and they're all funded. So what we're proposing is we will just take the funding away from 2 of the 14 vacancies, because based on historical happenings, we're not gonna fill 14 positions in 12 months.
So we're gonna help
Go
to
back to
get
that
12.
So we're gonna work real hard to get 14. I'd love to come back to you with good revenues and say we need to fund these other 2 positions, but in actuality, if we fill 6 or 8 of them, we're probably fine. And rather than tying money up in a position we know that's probably not gonna get filled anyway, we just unfunded it, those 2 positions for this year.
You never know with unemployment the way it's gonna be, who might step up and say, well,
Yeah.
try to give this a try.
If we get 14 in this upcoming year, Bill, that would be a lot, wouldn't it?
That would be huge. We probably get 10 or 12 a year hired, but we probably have 3, 4, 5 a year retire, and 3, 4, 5 a year that decide to sell insurance rather than working swing shifts the rest of their life. And, you know, they take other professions and things change in their family lives and stuff,
So, yeah, and so with that, we're not, that's just backfilling those positions.
yes,
So these are 14 new positions, so in reality, they even be able to handle training 14 new hires on top of their typical turnover?
well, the 14 is their typical turnover, plus ones that we've had, that we just kind of stay down right now.
Right.
But yes, we would, when we do an assessment, right now, we'll pick up 4 to 6 to 7 out of each assessment cycle, and we'll do at least 2 of those a year. And once we hire them, they go to the police academy for, gosh, it's either 9 or 13 weeks. I think it's 13 weeks.
9 weeks.
And then they come back, 9 weeks, okay.
Yes, sir.
And they've got to go through, FTO training and some additional training here. It usually takes close to a year by the time you hire somebody and you can really turn them loose to be out on the streets, by themselves.
Hey, could you address the marketing position, what mid-year means? As we kind of come out of this, what we're in now, we know special events is gonna be something that the community's gonna crave. So how are we leaving ourselves to be able to address that?
Well, that's a position that we all agreed to, add into Keisha's budget after the budget was adopted this time last year.
Right.
And it's never been filled to this point. And, that was what we looked at, was positions that were unfilled in order to try to cut some expenses. And in order to deal with special events, hopefully we'll be back to that point, August, September, sometime whenever we cross the threshold that needs to be crossed. We just have to pick it up with the existing staff and do the best we can with it.
And I just remind the commission, the dollar amount of these unfunded positions is about $506,000.
And I guess the other thing, we need you back up just a second. The receptionist position is, one of the folks that's just at the desk out front in the lobby. One of the folks in HR is gonna spend half their day upstairs doing that and work from up there and then go back downstairs and finish out their day downstairs. So we're gonna give, the management analyst, his budget is Dustin's former position. We're just running one shy in budget this coming cycle. The assistant P&R director, we'll just leave that vacant, but we're gonna, fill the park services manager. James feels like he can make that happen for a year. The rec worker and the senior center, part-time position, James feels like that they can work through that. So we've conferred with the departments, and part of the reductions in expenditures that you're seeing are a result of cuts that the departments came back with and said they felt like that they could offer up to help us reduce expenditures next year. Go ahead.
Okay. So here's our capital equipment slide. Just to point out, the $3.5 million of that $5.3 million on there is bond funded. It's the financial software and the fire truck. That's budgeted in the current year. That's a rebudget. The rest of the funding source is listed there. As you can see, most of what would have been our cash funded capital equipment is being funded through grants this year at $1.7 million. We hope. Yes, we hope. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Is that typical?
No.
That much in grant?
No, this is not
This is
typical.
special one-time money from the legislature.
Was it the bus stuff, or is that?
It's a combination, John. The state's gonna send us 1.5 in Corona recovery money, which will cover the police cars.
What color are they gonna be, by chance?
I was thinking purple and pink. The one thing you will see different, we can't buy sedans anymore.
More SUVs?
We're gonna have to go to SUVs. The ones that are funded in the current year that have already been bought, you'll see those delivered sometime in the next couple of months probably. Those are gonna be Explorers, and it looks like that's probably gonna be the police interceptor model that you're gonna see the vast majority of law enforcement agencies using.
You think y'all will get any trucks like ETSU and stuff? I'm just curious.
I don't know. We really haven't had that conversation to this point, but if we have a need, sure. School buses, police cars, and the fire truck can come out of the 1.5 coming from the state. And we're also getting some money from the VW settlement that'll pay for just about 2 school buses.
The VW settlement money is about $235,000, and as Mr. Peterson mentioned, the balance of that's the $1.5 million from the state. We have the takeaway here is we typically cash fund, not counting any debt service, but it's cash fund about $2.5 to $3 million worth of equipment, and this year it's $80,000 of general fund money. That's the balance that's left on the equipment that you see listed on the screen.
Steve, are there any restrictions on that 1.5? I know most of it was supposed to be for operating costs, I believe.
Capital. They don't want you to spend it on recurring funding.
It's all capital.
I won't say it's all capital, but I do know you cannot spend it on personnel or recurring costs.
So that money could be used for any kind of business development or something to help
I'll
jumpstart
need to double check before I give you a definitive answer, but I will check.
This is our capital projects list for 21. As I mentioned earlier, all the monies here are carryover from FY20 projects that either haven't been started in FY20 that were budgeted to, or will carry over into FY21. But again, like I mentioned a little while ago, we try to cash fund about $1 million in projects each fiscal year, and there is no new money in FY21 for projects. All this is carryover.
Will the water sewer facility,
Separate fund.
Separate budget.
is it,
It is not, we will not be talking about water sewer today. So all that is a,
but the intent is, we bought the land and they're gonna start in 21 on the facility.
yes, ma'am.
Is there
Do you-
anything budget-wise for the legacy part?
That's King Commons.
That's the King Commons?
That's the bottom, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The playground bid's open last week.
Yes.
And I believe that'll be on the second meeting in May for approval. So that will be going forward.
Is there anything else you want to say about projects?
No, I think it's pretty well self-explanatory, as you can see. About all of that has a grant tied to it that we're obligated to complete, and there's timelines associated with those grants. So we'll be finishing that stuff up. There's also some private funding involved, with some of those traffic signals, and we're obligated, those stuff has been bid out, materials have and whatnot, so.
This is just a brief discussion on debt finance capital. This is the repeat of what I said earlier, but rather than issue new debt due to debt roll-off in FY21, we are proposing to roll those funds into the operating budget because of the projected loss in revenues.
When is the next big roll-off? I remember we talked about 22 or 23.
I believe now it's gonna be in 23. We have some roll off. Now, there will be we are planning on a debt issue in 21, probably late summer, fall timeframe, which will be the money, the bulk of that will come from what was proposed for 20. We just didn't issue it. And we'll pick up in PEP debt, we'll pick up just a little bit more, $500,000 or so, for the architectural work on the 3 elementary schools. Not the construction of the schools, but the architectural work, which will, one of them's finished now, and the others will be, when I say finished, it's ready to go to bid. It'll be later, probably late summer or fall, if they get finished.
It is. The same thing about quasi.
Quasi-governmentals, with just a couple of notable exceptions. I think they're all, well, no, I misspoke. They're all recommended for funding at the same level as 20, with the exception of the JCDA. I guess a couple of things I would point out is emergency management, or not emergency management, emergency communications, which is 911, had asked for an additional $289,000. They made a similar request to the county. Unless we get fund balance for a recurring cost, or we eliminate something else, we just don't have the $289,000 additional dollars.
What was that's almost $500,000,
together.
yeah, what's their need?
You got,
Do not have that with me, I'm sorry.
okay, there was, rather than me sitting here and speaking
That's all right.
incorrectly,
We're not talking
I
about
read
it.
it last night, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but I'll send you that, we can pull it up and send you all an electronic copy of their request. And then, CVB actually asked for 701 and plus, the 107 that's been going, or comes in from the Carnegie. So as you can see, we did not fund them at that level. It's built into the budget to fund them at the same level as FY20.
Yes. And their request, that's the formula that they get based on hotel motel tax. And so the 701,000 is what they would have gotten based on FY19 audited numbers. But at this point, we have chosen just to hold them flat.
Yeah. Get the
While
$14,000.
can I interrupt with a question on that? We rely on that hotel motel tax to make some of the debt service commitments that I believe exist at ETSU's Performing Arts Center. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there a risk that at what point does a cratering of occupancy start to have implication for our capacity to meet those obligations near term?
I think it's really gonna have to crater pretty hard, Vice Mayor. I feel like we're gonna be okay to meet all of our debt service needs. I'm not concerned about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good point, though.
Yes, that's great.
I mean,
There is some surplus in that reserve too. We're actually building up a little bit every year, so there's $100 or, I don't know if it's $200,000 surplus in there that we could apply toward that if we needed to.
That's the last slide.
did we
For
ever
this
receive
presentation.
a request from the chamber for some funding?
They asked for $150,000 to start a new program, which is not funded in the proposed budget. And of course, they asked for, additional monies dealing with their move and whatnot, which none of that is included in this budget as well.
Are there any other agencies who made requests that are on this list?
No, ma'am. I would make one request,
I want to know who we're going to hear from.
is if we could make a request, would there be a possibility of the Animal Control Board assuming the balance of the debt on their building at some point in time? Just a thought. But that is included in this budget. When the building was built, and I don't remember the dollar amount now, I want to say we issued $1.5 million maybe in debt, and the city's paying, then there was about $1 million or better raised in fundraising. And so you make an operating appropriation as well as a debt service payment there, which is a good investment.
And I know where you're coming from. Honestly, any gains off of that contribution is to offset the huge amount that we raised through donations. We'll take a look at it.
Okay.
That's all that's in the PowerPoint presentation. Go ahead.
Can you pull up the budget ordinance?
If you're referring to the ad, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I can. Okay, well, before I say what I was getting ready to say, let's go with that.
Okay.
So this is going to be in the paper this weekend?
He'll be in the paper Saturday. Yes, ma'am.
This is the city charter requirement, and
Right.
we advertise it again at the end of May, which is the State Budgeting Act requirement. Almost very similar ads.
We have to have 3 votes on this by what date?
June 30th.
June 30th.
Yes.
First one's scheduled, right now we're scheduled for the first meeting in June, special call meeting the next week, and the final third reading is right now is tentatively scheduled at the regular second meeting in June.
Okay.
And first reading is public hearing.
When's that call meeting, is already set?
We usually do it like at 7 in the morning or something, the next week.
Is there,
We can do
I mean,
it,
while she's pulling that up, is there, if anybody's got their calendar, are there days we need to avoid on the second week of June?
I don't have a lot of plans right now. Things are pretty up in the air. The plans I did have are slowly emailing me, telling me they're canceled or postponed.
that'd be the week of the 8th. I think we tentatively threw out a date along that Thursday, but it could be any day.
Thursday evening probably wouldn't be good for me. But if it's in the morning, it doesn't matter.
Let's do a morning one, that seems to work really well.
Whatever works for you all.
I prefer the morning one for one of them. It just kind of breaks it up. In years past, I feel like we've done one of the readings, basically 2 of the 3 meetings have happened at our regular first and third meetings, correct?
Yes, that's what we try to do.
And then just plug in a morning meeting and you've got your 3.
Yeah, you only need 3 people,
We
right?
don't have to wait a full 7 days on second reading, do we?
There has to be 7 days between first and third.
Okay, so if we do.
You do Thursday, you're good to go. And I mean, another option is if we have discussions over the next 2 weeks or whatever, and you all get comfortable with the budget, we could do first reading the last meeting in May, couldn't we?
We'll have to really hustle because there's a 10-day
There's 10 day notice
advertising
period,
requirement.
yeah. Never
prior
mind,
to that.
never mind, we'll never.
No, I want to, I mean, this might be Bob's last go at this. I want to see him hustle.
All right,
Dustin will be hustling.
I like it.
As long as we get this done, we can, if we don't have any more meetings, if you guys like what you hear.
Okay, what's, at least what I think is before you now.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
And I'm gonna let you run with this for about 4 minutes. I'll be right back.
Okay. If we wanted to do first reading on what I think is the 21st of May,
Yes.
so we would have to publish at least 10 days before that. So
May 9th.
we could do Saturday, May 9th, or Sunday, May 10th. Which means I would have to get it to the paper that Monday or Tuesday before.
I don't see a real compelling reason that we have to move everything up. I mean, it works, if everybody's willing to come into 7 one morning or 7:30 and
It's up to you.
pass it on
Yeah, no,
second reading.
I think we'll.
It's that charter requirement that makes it challenging.
Yeah, let's do it the way we've always done it. That's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Right.
That sounds good.
The state budgeting law doesn't specify the public hearing has to be on first reading. You just have to have one. So by the state requirement, we could have it on first, second, or third. They just want you to have one. But our charter pushes it back to the first, and that's where it gets very challenging to meet that time frame.
With the budget ordinance, you have to have, it has to be during a regularly scheduled meeting, not a call, and public hearing on first reading.
Okay, so
That's one.
this is what's gonna be in the paper then?
That, what you have there is what's gonna be in the paper, and it's basically a breakout of everything we talked about. The number that, if you could scroll down just a little bit.
I'll have.
Thank you.
Let me ask a question real quick. Have the quantis, been notified that their requests were not entered into the budget? So if they see this in the paper, are they gonna know?
We were going to get your feedback today on that, and if you were okay with that, send that out tomorrow.
And it's not specified in the ad what the exact funding is.
Okay.
It's that particular category, it's part of another number, so it doesn't break it out into detail.
Okay. They probably need, just from an expectation standpoint, though, for planning purposes.
And several did not ask for an increase.
Right.
That is correct.
And we have communicated with the CBB, and we're trying to hold them at the current.
What about communicating with JCDA what the current budget reflects?
That one, I'm not sure, I don't know if anyone's communicated that or not.
I mean, I have communicated it as a member of the JCDA that change might likely be coming, but I think the sooner and the more clearly that's communicated, the better, just so that they can begin to make their plans accordingly.
We'll make sure that gets out.
So is the chamber gonna stay in their building, or what's their plan? Has anybody talked to them?
I have no idea what they're doing. I'll inquire tomorrow. I've got a conference call with Mitch, Bob, and Alicia tomorrow sometime, so I'll ask it. Looking at the CVB budget request, their line item expense for building has gone up about $10,000 a year, if I remember right. So it looks to me like they have built their budget around moving out of the building that they're in and into the mill, I assume, because they've restructured their line item budget to where it looks like they're planning on a move.
I think the JCDA is gonna have to be looking for a place, but that might be a source of income for the chamber, is to rent some office space over across the street to the JCDA. And maybe do.
Chamber does have some empty space upstairs that JCDA can move into and make a little revenue off of.
That's
True. I don't know, I'll ask Commissioner, see what we come up with.
Maybe catch up on some deferred maintenance too.
Okay, so the ad that goes in the paper Saturday, that is the PDF document that I sent you yesterday. That is all funds, because we're not going to talk about enterprise funds today. But what I wanted to call your attention to, especially on the first page, and then any more detail we need to get into, I'll leave at the manager's discretion, is the fund balance drawdown. And that's the number, it's towards the bottom. And as of now, as it is presented to you today, the fund balance drawdown's at about $521,000.
Budget, you saying projected budget or?
The 21 budget is projected to have a $521,000 drawdown on fund balance. In light of everything we've talked about, no revenue growth, revenue decline, and the fact that we're not cash funding capital at numbers that we typically do, the fact that we're not cash funding projects like we normally would. The 4%, fortunately, is not in there, but Mr. Peterson discussed, what we're doing with the insurance. Had we not repurposed those monies, that number obviously would have been in the millions, which is what Mr. Peterson said early on. So we have gone through unfunded positions, cut in departmental operating budgets. The debt roll-off has been rolled into operating. Also, as Mr. Peterson said earlier, the Public Works repaving budget is at the same funding level as it was in FY20, or proposed. That's $3.15 million, which, if revenues don't bounce back, we need to go grab some money. That's low-hanging fruit.
So Pete, you had a preliminary discussion with Steve Barnett, and are we going to set up a school board commission meeting to talk through what their budget request is going to be, like we normally do?
I have talked to Steve. We haven't talked about details about meeting with you, but my understanding is they're not going to ask for any additional appropriations from City Commission this year. They understand the position that we're in. I think through a combination of an increase in BEP funding coming from the state, some one-time recovery money, and some expenditure reductions that they're, at least Steve, I won't speak for his board, but I think Steve feels like confident that they can come in with a budget that will not require additional funding from us this year.
And I've spoken with Tim Lyle, so I think they have a very clear understanding of the
Yes, ma'am.
hardship everybody's going to be under, and it does appear that through goes to state and perhaps even federal funding, that some additional monies will be coming in for education, so that'll be a good thing.
Yes, ma'am. Just to kind of recap, again, we're gonna hit fund balance for $500,000. You've got 1.6 in debt service roll-off. We've got about $500,000 in operations reductions, about 350 in unfunded positions. Is that right, Dave?
About 506.
506 in unfunded positions. We've been able to reduce fuel costs $250,000. So, then you've got let's say $4 million worth of cash funded capital that we're not doing this year. So it gets you back to that $7 million hole that I mentioned early on when we started talking about this. Staff, beyond this staff, the entire departmental staff has done a really good job of looking at ops to see what cuts could be made that would not impact service delivery or the quality of the service delivery that we make every day. As is the case with any budget, my number one priority is we need to do this as cost effectively as we can, but we need to make sure that we're delivering a quality service. And if we make cuts, we need to be very careful as to how we make cuts so that we don't impact the quality of service delivery. Not an easy budget. Been quite a bit of meetings, discussion, and work and trying to make ends meet, but I think this is a budget that delivers what we need to deliver, and we're making some equipment replacements that have to be made. I mean, you talk about police trucks, police cars, fire trucks, and school buses. That's mission critical stuff that if we don't replace it, then we can't deliver service the way we need to. School buses have a lifespan to them that the state enforces. So that the plan in the budget today will keep us on schedule so that we don't get further behind with the size that our fire department's grown to. We're really looking at replacing the truck about every year from now on. You've got 9 frontline pumpers, and you got 3 ladder trucks. Then there's various other vehicles, and they've all got a lifespan of 20 years or so at best. So we probably went 6 or 8 years without buying anything, and we've gotten behind, and we're going to have to get caught up a little bit. Unfortunately, there are some really good projects that got pushed out. I don't see us being able to do anything beyond some stormwater work on Walnut Street. Of course, construction design is underway. We will complete the design work. When we get to the stormwater budget, there's money in there to do stormwater work on Walnut Street. That's really what we had planned on starting with anyway, so we'll hopefully proceed with that. Stormwater you'll also see some projects in stormwater with some bridge replacements and dealing with some flooding issues in a couple of different places around town that they've got the cash to deal with all that. And then, as I mentioned previously, when we get into detail on water sewer, they've got a number of projects that are either already bid, ready to bid, or will need to be a cash-funded project in the upcoming year's budget. So there'll be a lot of activity in stormwater and water sewer this year. We have a lot of maintenance that we can get caught up on in public works without taking on a bunch of new operation projects. Drainage, curb repair, sidewalk repair, that kind of stuff that is still built into their operating budget on an annual basis. You just won't see us out doing big projects like building playgrounds or doing extensive sidewalk or trail new construction, those types of things.
things that I think we need to have some discussion around is economic recovery. The governor certainly has appointed this committee, this ERG. Are we going to kind of retrench and try to hold on to all of our dollars? Or are we going to try to look at our community and see what resources that we have that we might target in the right direction to really help spur the comeback? So that's kind of my concern right now. I'm trying to keep up with other communities in terms of what they're doing. But I certainly would like to see us at least put together a team of people who really have, you know, their fingers on the pulse of the economy, what we're facing here. You know, right now, we're guessing what we might be facing. We don't know for sure, but it could be quite significant. What does it mean to Johnson City if we have a 20% unemployment rate? So as we start looking at that, I mean, obviously it's time to get those people back in the market, people working again. Is that our role and responsibility? Is it through our arms that we work with, the chamber, the NetRev, the JCPA? When we look at the funding levels for those groups, do they have the resources they need to even work on our behalf? So that's just something I think about all the time. What are we going to do to help jumpstart this economy and get us back in place so we're not, you know, for those who were in public service in 2008, I was on the school board at that time, but it was painful. And basically, we were just kind of waiting, you know, for things to recover. And hoping the money was going to start getting generated. So I'm kind of interested in what you think, and how we might approach this. I think a lot of people are kind of looking to government at this time for a lot of answers that we don't really have. And now as we go into this recovery phase with COVID and following the governor's guidelines, he's put a lot of thought into it. Seems to be a lot of discipline in the way he's directing this along with the guidelines, and that's what we're bound to right now. You know, how do we get this thing, so that we can try to kickstart something? Any thoughts? John, in your world, what are you seeing out there? I mean, you're on the financial edge of everything.
I'm seeing a can getting kicked down the road about 3 months.
I don't know. Hopefully these furloughs are short term, but again, the sooner we get the economy up and going, people back to work, the better everything is for everybody. And I mean, that's kind of really short and sweet where I see things. As far as you know, what you're talking about doing, we definitely need to be thinking about opportunities and who those partners can be, and qualified and ready, and quite honestly, you know, hopefully some of them are on the front end of this instead of sitting on hands waiting for others to tell them what to do.
One of the things that Pete and I have talked about on several occasions, you know, our sort of strategic planning that we were in the middle of really relied a lot on entrepreneurship, on remote workers, on a lot of things that would kind of help reshape who we are. Well, we've all become remote workers, you know, in the last 2 months. And we've learned a lot from it, that you know, it works pretty well. So the big thing is do we have the right infrastructure in place in our community to continue to promote that? Do we just wait and see, or do we continue to work on our strategies to head in that direction? We have, you know, we were talking about the co-starters, the accelerators, the really getting things in place to move that along. We can wait and see, or we can stay committed to, you know, where we were headed originally.
I was intrigued, actually, this morning by a Move to Kingsport post on Facebook that was recognizing the uptick in out-of-state views for real estate within, well, primarily Kingsport, Bristol, but Johnson City as well. And that, you know, people are looking from these big cities to move to smaller locations, where COVID wasn't as big of a stressor. So that might be an opportunity for us.
And Kingsport gets a lot of hits because their average price of a house, new sales is about $184,000, and we're like $225,000. So they may be.
That'd be all more reason to look over here. Nicer house.
Is there something we can do in support of the governor's effort after we see exactly what happens with that?
I think we
As
are.
opposed to going two different directions, maybe not just wait until let everything happen from Nashville. You know, I think we got representation on that. We got ETSU up here. Maybe there's something that we can do in support of that once that starts to get rolling. And Wendy, did you let me back in the meeting? I know you kicked me out.
I didn't kick you out.
My computer died.
I was gonna say, I figured your computer died.
I have been speaking with John Smith, and, he's certainly very willing to help walk through some of the Brian, and I think ETSU willing partner to help us sort through some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think you got to do a two-pronged approach. We've got to do what we can to get back to where we were. That doesn't mean we can't start working on new stuff, but I don't think we can put all of our eggs or efforts in trying to do something new and not try to kindle the fire to get us back to where we were. You know, in talking to Alicia, some of the manufacturers that have done some furloughs and some layoffs are planning to start bringing people back here in the next week or 10 days. So, you know, I think one of the things that's going to be really challenging is people getting comfortable to get back out and do things again. I mean, this was not an economic problem. It was a health problem. It wasn't like 2008 at all, to where the economy blew up on us. It's a health issue, and people's confidence are shaken. You know, it's a matter of everybody getting comfortable getting back out and spending money, and I think the effort that's being made now to reopen the economy, if 3 weeks from now we don't have this big spike in new cases, everybody has reason to be comfortable and get back out, because you've had enough time for incubation to occur, transmission to occur, then incubation to occur, and probably a week to get tested and get your test results back. So I'm thinking by the 3rd or 4th week of May, we should have a reasonable idea of what kind of spread we're going to get. Would that be safe, Dr. Calhoun? Or?
I'm not an expert. Everybody's an expert on this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just according to what you read and what you listen to.
Right.
But certainly, everybody's going to be watching for that next spike, if there is one. Now, our testing numbers absolutely are going up as far as cases, but at least in testing, probably better than any state that I know so far.
Yeah.
It's
So,
we may have a hospitalization rate that we really need to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a set of metrics that include how many hospital beds are, you know, ICUs, how many ventilators you have, the testing, the PPE. So when you put all those in a dashboard, then you can see what the tolerance of the community would be for spread.
we're in good shape, right?
I mean, thankfully, well, there are only 8 active cases in the county.
And I think what you're saying, though, is right, that it's not necessarily, we don't know, Dr. Calhoun, you're right, but that level of confidence, one way or the other at the end of May, will be going.
I guess I would want to respond to the mayor's question in a slightly different way, or maybe similar to what Pete was saying. You know, in the setup to the question, she rightly pointed out we were in the middle of the strategic planning, and I don't remember exactly how she said it, but it had sort of a past tense quality. We were doing this, you know, and I think we still are, and we still should be. And really the way ahead toward economic vitality isn't a response to COVID. It's a response to the need for economic vitality. COVID just happens to be the hurdle we're going to have to jump over first. It could have been something else. It just happens that it's COVID and the after effects of it. And I heard an economist speaking on a conference call I was on a week or so ago, and he alluded to some of what Pete just said, which is the underlying variables in the economy aren't what's caused this disruption. You know, it's not like the housing crisis or a banking crisis, something where all of a sudden the fundamentals have changed. The key thing, I think, is to get back to that strategic planning document and really now more than ever look to all of our strategic partners to say everybody needs to be rowing, and everybody needs to be rowing in the same direction, because there's only so many resources available, and if we're not seizing opportunities, somebody else is, and we need to be working in harmony. And that, to me, is a product of the strategic plan more than anything.
It would probably be a good idea, in the next, few weeks, that we get that group back together, that, you know, we met over in the administrative conference room several months ago with Chamber and JCPA and NetRep and CBB, and they've been out on the front lines, JCPA. They've been on the front lines and are really seeing things that, you know, perhaps all of us are not seeing. So it'd be good to get their input, in addition to probably a John Smith, or having some of the other folks in the community come over, and let's just kind of throw some things out on the table here. We still have Bridge who are working on finalizing our strategic work, so we'll have that back to us. And a part of some adaptation they may make to it is some economic recovery strategies as well. So I'll be following up on that. Maybe we'll have that in the next few weeks or so. All right, is there anything else anybody would like to add? Seems like forever since we've seen each other, other than a little screen on the TV.
So we get an agenda
Friday.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow is Friday.
Yeah, it is Friday, I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
leave days just go into days right now.
and
Let's see, here.
plans for the agenda review on Monday.
My preference is Zoom. It's quick.
Let's do it.
It's efficient. It saves everybody travel time, and
It's not potentially contagious.
easily contagious.
What are we doing for the Thursday meeting? Is that gonna be an
Early
in-person?
Zoom, too.
Okay,
Yeah.
that works.
Probably through May,
Okay.
that we'll do that.
Our plans right now are to not change city operations any sooner than the 1st of June. We'll leave City Hall closed and still work from home where we can, and leave the changes in place. Unless you all heard something different, I think everything we've done has been pretty seamless with our customer base. I haven't heard any problems that have arisen or anything. The other thing, we need to pick up and do enterprise funds in schools, and have we got a calendar already set up for those?
We have 3, including today, we had 3 budget work sessions scheduled. Today, 7th, and 14th, all starting at 2 p.m.
All right, those will be the next 2 Thursdays.
Yes. So I guess my question was going to be to you, or is to you, or do you still want to stick with that plan?
Well, we're gonna need at least one more day to get through,
Right.
to get through the enterprise and the schools. So y'all wanna do that on the 7th? That's the day of the next city commission meeting. If we want to do, probably do a 2 o'clock meeting and get something to eat. And,
Now, Pete,
or we could do a Zoom meeting. I mean, however y'all want to do it.
Pete, my calendar reflects that we already had a budget workshop scheduled for May 7th at 2.
We did.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So if the 7th still works, we'll plan on doing schools and the enterprise funds on the 7th.
By Zoom, or,
We'll do it by Zoom, you want to come back down here?
well, for down here, we got city commission meeting.
Well, if we're doing the city commission meeting by Zoom, I'm not sure it makes sense for us to all be together in an administrative conference room and then go home to be on a Zoom meeting. And yet I don't think it's prudent to be doing the city commission meetings yet, because they aren't really that much different than a church service as far as the way the people are gathered and put in there.
So, let's think through, probably Zoom. We'll have the school system, they'll be coming, I'm sure. Or at least Steve and maybe Tim.
Let me talk to
Okay.
Steve and see, and we'll
Right.
get more detail out to you all, tomorrow or Monday. Is there any more information or anything else that we can provide for you all associated just with general fund? Thoughts, comments, criticisms, changes?
In this, who knows what's coming? I think you've done a great job. So, I mean, it's hard to predict what things are gonna be like. I'm praying that it's normal 3 months from now.
Me too.
That was the intent,
Yeah.
just to give us
This is a
flexibility.
starting place, and if things get great, we can adjust, and if things don't, we'll have to adjust another way.
And I guess one thing that I may not have adequately addressed is, we've built this from a very conservative approach. We need to plan now that we're gonna go in and take a deep dive on this budget and see where we're standing in January or February. And if revenues have rebounded better than what we budgeted, then we're gonna need to have a sit down, let's talk about FY '21 budget amendment sometime probably in February or so that if there's things that we're not doing you all would like to fund, we can do a budget amendment and appropriate additional funding and pick up projects or whatever it is that you want to address at that point in time.
I think there's a possibility of some additional funding from different sources that we're learning about from the federal government and that'll be coming through the state. We know we're gonna get some extra CDBG funds. What are we gonna do with those? Some of them are earmarked for.
You'll probably see that in the next 30 days or less. Yeah, you'll probably be asked to make a decision. I think we got 313,000.
313.
Yeah, we need to spend that money now. There's no need sitting on that, I don't think. I mean, there's people out there that need it.
Yeah, but it's earmarked for certain things.
My only thing, again, would be to check into if there's any price differential because of the oil. And
Yes.
that could be that opportunity where we stretched
Sure.
a lot of mileage, literally.
I agree.
Yes, sir.
I agree. All right, anything else?
Thanks for your
Thank you all.
time today.
Thank you very much. Meeting
Everybody stay
adjourned.
safe.
Bye.
All right.
Hey, Joe.
See you, Joe.